Okay, thank you community members who are joining us today. It is Thursday, September 10th, and we are here for a live Q&A. This is a weekly event, and we're here answering questions that we received in advance. And we plan to answer live questions if we receive them while we're here talking with you. If we don't get to your live questions, we'll come back to them. We'll try to answer them in a future week. So thanks so much for sending those our way. I'm going to go ahead and turn this over to Dr. Linda Quinn, who will start us off with an introduction and then invite our colleagues here to introduce themselves as well. Thank you.
Welcome and thank you for joining us today. I'm Linda Quinn. I'm superintendent of the Ferndale School District. I'll let my colleagues introduce themselves.
I'm Mark Deebach, the assistant superintendent for business and support services.
I'm Faye Britt, executive director for teaching and learning.
And I'm Rebecca Champagne, Director of Special Education Services.
Thanks again for being here. The last time we were on the screen for Facebook Live, we just finished our second day of the 1920-21 school year, and now we have 6 days under our belt, and we're starting to get into the rhythm of a school year. Our secondary students are in classes every day. Our elementary students are Zooming with their teachers. And still doing the elementary teachers are still also conferencing with families. It's feeling like school, where our teachers are so excited to see our kids. Our kids are showing up ready to be back, and we're doing it. As you might expect when you turn a whole school district into a distance learning virtual kind of learning environment, the biggest challenges we're facing right now have to do with technology. We've had technology at the secondary level for a while with one-to-one devices for our students, but we have just finished handing out about thousands, I'll just say thousands of devices. Some of which we took out of retirement and fixed them up and got them ready to go out, but thousands of devices, some of them to our younger students who aren't used to having a device at home. And we've, like I say, the challenges are getting all of those thousands of devices hooked up to the right platforms and the right resources so that they can be usable. And I know it's frustrating. When I know how frustrating it is when my device doesn't work. I can only imagine. And so we're also working on how we can develop a support system that can help you when there's problems with a device, whether it's logging in or the device isn't working. I want to remind everyone that last spring, we ordered 700 new devices, and we were told at the time we'd get them in August, but everybody in the world was ordering new devices. So they're a bit back ordered. We're still hoping they arrive in September. And when those new devices come, we'll have an inventory that we can use to trade out ones that, if the problems are device problems, we'll be able to have an inventory and trade those out. And another challenge for us in Ferndale is that when the levy failed in February and we had to make cuts in our system, and people encouraged us to cut teachers last and classroom support last, we ended up cutting a lot of our tech support. At the time, we didn't know we were going to be entering into a pandemic, but we've had to really tighten our belts. So we have a whole system. We've doubled the number of students working on technology and more than cut in half the resources that we have to support that. So we're working double time to try to support you, but it's a reality of life that we have fewer resources right now. I will say that we're looking for creative solutions to provide that tech support that we know is really important right now. And this week we've hired a wonderful teacher who substituted for us last week, and she is running in a kind of an emergency hotline right now for problems that can't get solved in the building. And so when the first line is to call your buildings, but after that, then we've got someone that they can refer you to that can help you. If the problem can be worked out by having someone walk you through the steps from the other end of a phone line, we're working on that. We've got some other solutions coming too. We're getting some interns from BTC that are going to come work for us and man some help desks. And we hope to have a much better system by next week even.
Thank you, Dr. Quinn. And I just want to say, Laura, Greg have posted some really nice supportive things just in support of staff and teachers. So many thanks for that. And we'll come back. There's some live questions here we'll come back to.
Sure.
I want to first go through a few advanced questions that we received, and I'm just going to dive right in. We received the question from a parent via email, and the parent says, our family has only experienced a small financial loss during the pandemic, so we don't necessarily need the free lunches, but the convenience of them during remote learning would definitely be appreciated. My question is, for a family like ours, does taking the food boxes put more strain on the food service system? Does it help boost the system, or does it matter?
Well, thanks for that question. We have a legacy of wanting to serve families in Ferndale. And if taking one of the lunch boxes helps your family, then I'm going to say go ahead and do it. With that said, we get reimbursed for some of the food that we serve, but there is an expense to the district. But I just know how much stress is on families. I know, and if this is one small way we can serve your family, then take a lunchbox. And we're happy to be able to provide that little bit of help.
Absolutely. We had another parent question come in via email, and it was simply, who should I go to with technology questions?
As Linda mentioned earlier, your first call is to your teacher or your advisor, either way at the building. And then we're working on a process of escalation depending on what the issue is. So if the issue is with an application, Google or Canvas or one of the online curriculum programs, Zoom, we're dealing with those internally as a district. So we will escalate through a process of trying to problem solve those. And if it is a hardware issue, you will get referred out to our hardware service provider to get your device looked at. More information coming on that. We'll get that published on the website, and so as we've kind of reinvented the education process, we're also reinventing the technology process. So all of our technology staff, everything is new to the district. So we're, we just came through, just wrapped up handing out over 3,000 devices to families, and learned a lot in that process. But now we're in the process of trying to figure out, okay, how do we service those? How do we make sure they all work? While the majority of them are working and functioning fine, we know there's several that are out there that are having issues, and that is now our priority, and we're working on those, and information will be coming very quickly.
Yeah. Okay, so it sounds like the first thing to do is contact your school building.
Correct.
Okay, that sounds great.
They will guide you from there.
That sounds great. Thanks, Mark. Okay, so the next question is came via Facebook from a parent, and the parent wants to know, can boxes from meal service be returned the next week?
You mean
I
for
asked
recycling?
that very same question.
Yes, for recycling. Yep.
Yeah, I saw the boxes and asked the same thing. So I appreciate your green and frugal nature with that question. We, at this time, do not have a process for recycling or repurposing the boxes, but that's something we will look into and see if we can figure that out. So thank you for that question.
Okay, so we're looking into that one. That sounds great. So Shantae asks, and this came in via Facebook as well. She said, I'd like to know more about the increased costs for remote learning, which based on the most recent update for the local COVID rate will be in place for quite a while.
I get asked that question frequently, like, can't you run a school district more cheaply if you have all the kids on distance learning? No, actually, we're spending the money differently, but no, if anything, well, it can't cost us more in Ferndale because we've had to make a lot of cuts. But even when I talk to my colleagues in other districts, they're finding that if anything, their expenditures are going up. Mark, you probably have some examples.
Yeah, so it's about spending the money differently. Like Linda said, we made very substantial cuts to our budget, whether we were in person or remote. So things were going to change, and it was going to be we were going to spend less no matter what happened. But we're spending more money on computers. So instead of buying as much copy paper, we're buying more computers. Instead of buying textbooks, we're purchasing online curriculum. So there are trade-offs, right? We're spending a lot of money on cleaning supplies and personal protective equipment. We've never had so many conversations and spent so much on PPE. It's about spending the money differently than more so than spending less.
I would say that 7 months ago, I didn't know what PPE stood for, but you're right. We talk about that a lot. So the bottom line is we made all those cuts because of the levy. We're spending our savings account. We're spending into our savings account now. And we're doing our best to be as frugal as we can, but yeah, it costs quite a bit, and our staff is working harder than I think they ever have to try to manage all of this.
Thank you. We had a question from Sophie on Facebook. She says, has anyone been able to update the laptops at school? Nothing is popping up to update.
Yeah, so the updates there's a couple of different ways to get updates. So there is what's called a beacon that is actually pushing certain updates out via the internet, going out into space. And so by restarting your device, you're going to get a certain number of updates that are pushed out just from our system here. If that doesn't work, or for some of the updates, you actually need to connect to district Wi-Fi. So if you come into one of the buildings, and there's a heat map that we spoke about last week in the Zoom that's been put on the website, so you can see which schools and where specifically each school has the strongest internet signal, strongest Wi-Fi signal. You can go there, basically do a restart, and you will get some updates as well. And if that doesn't work, if you're not able to get your updates either via either of those two methods, certainly call the school, and the techs, our on-site technicians, will actually be holding office hours starting next Monday at each of the buildings on a rotational basis, and a schedule will be published to let you know how to drop off your device to have it looked at if you're having trouble with it.
That's great. Thank you, Mark. Okay, so we have another question that came in via Facebook, this one from Debbie. Debbie says, do any of your students have more than 4 classes? My student isn't scheduled for math, English, or science, and says she will have her current classes all year.
That sounds like a high school question because they currently have a 4-period day. If you remember back in the spring, our students last year had 8-period days. Although they didn't have 8 periods each day, they had 4 periods one day and 4 periods the next. So they had an 8-period schedule. And that was just so much for our high school kids to keep track of, knowing what day they should be in what class and how to balance that workload. So instead of having the 4 periods one day and the 4 periods the next, we moved it into a quarter. So they would have 4 periods for a quarter, and then the next 4 periods the next quarter. So what that means is that they won't have those classes for year long. Their classes will switch at the quarter, which the first quarter ends like the first week of November. And then they'll pick up what would have been periods 5, 6, 7, and 8. One of the things that the high school counselors worked really hard on was to try to make sure that like their core classes like English, math, science were in back-to-back quarters for continuity. And then they also realized that for some of our students that maybe have, say, English, and they're in an AP English class, that they may have that AP class for first and second quarter, and then they'll work to keep those students tied in so that they don't feel like they lose ground prior to the AP test in the spring. So kind of making the best to try and narrow down the focus, and then, like I said, flipping at the quarter instead of flipping every other day.
That's great. Thank you, Faye. We had a question come in from Megan via email, and she says, how do we get problems with logging into Google Classroom resolved? We've called the school, opened a ticket, and had the ticket escalated by my child's teacher. What do we do now?
That actually currently is the process. So like I mentioned earlier, we're putting some protocols in place. In fact, Linda mentioned earlier as well, we've brought somebody in to kind of serve as an escalation person. So we're working these things out, right? And we're dealing with a fairly significant volume, plus the starting of school in a wildly different format. So I very much apologize for the struggles that you're having. I think we all have experienced technical difficulties and computer issues, and understand the frustration. You know, I have a printer that I've never been able to print on. I get it. It's something that should be simple and isn't, and it's terribly terribly frustrating and concerning, particularly for kids at the start of the school year. So we understand, we appreciate your situation. We're working really hard to get it resolved. So please continue to bear with us, and you know, if you don't hear back within a day or two, you know, certainly reach out again, and we'll get you fixed up. It's just taken us a minute. So thank you for hanging in there.
Thanks, Mark. We had a question come in via a community member who asks, when will we begin phasing in-person school, and which kids will begin in person first?
That's a great question. I met with all of the Whatcom County superintendents this morning, and that's something we talked about. A week ago, Dr. Stern, who's the medical official for the Whatcom County Health Department, met with all of the Whatcom County superintendents and told us that our community rate of spread in Whatcom County is going in the right direction, and that we can start thinking about or planning for cautiously bringing in certain groups of students. But he recommended that we don't, it's not something we can change every other day, so that we work on a 2 to 3 week cycle. So that's what we've just started doing right now, is planning for within about 3 weeks or so, starting to bring in certain students by invitation who are maybe greatest need for in-person services. So I know some of our special education students, our English language learners, our littlest learners. So, and I think I can just say that we'll be putting out more information on that within the next 10 days or so on how that will work. And the priorities that we're going to be following are the ones that were established by the reopening task force. And Rebecca, I know you were on the equity and access subgroup, I think. And
That's
you,
correct, yes.
and so there's a priority order for that. And we're very hopeful that those numbers are going to continue to go in the right direction, and that we can gradually start bringing kids back. That information about stages is all on our website too. I think it's under a tab called status.
Great. I'm going to take just a minute to look at a live question here. Shauna had a question about the Wi-Fi signal. And she wanted to know specifically if the Wi-Fi signal is Monday through Friday or if it extends over the weekend. Can you speak to that?
You mean if you come in our parking lots?
That's right. Yep.
Oh, we don't ever turn it off.
No.
So,
Okay. So Shauna, if you're still listening, the Wi-Fi signal is constant. It's always
no,
on.
we don't turn it off.
Okay. I'm going to go to another advanced question we got, and this one was just actually right before we broadcast. We got it on our Facebook page, and it's from Joey. And Joey wanted to know how class lists were developed this year.
Well, they were developed with the same care and attention to groupings that we use every year. Only this year we had an extra 100 or so variables to think about. Actually, what we did, especially at the elementary level, is we worked really hard to put together classes of students who could stay together for the year. Because we know those classes form family units and relationships, and we didn't want to have to break them up when we come back to in-person learning. So on the survey we sent out in the middle of August, we asked families, we told families that we have every intention of getting back to in-person learning in a phased-in way, first through a hybrid model, and then as we can go further. And we asked them whether they would send their kids back to school when we open it up to in-person learning. And we had a number of families who said no. They would prefer to be in a distance learning mode all year long. We tried to group at the elementary level, we tried to group those students together, even if it meant students from a couple schools being with one teacher, so that when in-person learning starts, we don't have to disrupt them, so that they don't have to get a new teacher or get a new classmates. So for instance, if a certain fifth grade teacher maybe teaches at Cascadia, but she might have students from a couple elementary schools because she has agreed to stay in a remote mode all year, and her students want that or their families want that all year. So and we also then even tried to go as far as to, if families said when we come back halftime, we want to be in the AA or the BB, we tried to put them together so that they could come. Like I said, there were lots of variables this year. I'm sure it won't be perfect, but we did our best to protect those important class relationships.
Thank you, Dr. Quinn. I just want to briefly say, Christy says, thank you, FSD. This hasn't been easy for any of us. We're all still in this together. She says, my kiddos are excited to be connecting with staff and students. Very, very cool. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Very cool. And then Jill, I see a question from Jill. Jill has a question regarding the health department, the quantity per 100,000. She says, aren't we already well below the 75 per 100,000? Is there a place where she can go for more information on that?
Yeah, I think the link is, I know the link is under the status button on our website. It's also, if you go to the Whatcom County Health Department, I just looked at it today. It has it broken out by school districts and by the whole county, we are below the 75. When the health department recommended that we start in distance learning, the metrics from the state say below 25, you can get back to in person. Above 75, you need to be closing things down that are in person. Between 25 and 75, you can proceed with caution. In the 1st of August, well, it was the 4th of August, when the health department recommended to us that we needed to plan to start remotely, we were at 63 and headed in the wrong direction. And they knew we needed a little lead time. You can't just say tomorrow you're going to be. So they recommended that we get ready to start, and we start remotely. Now, I think the county average, the Ferndale average, we're a little higher. We're at about 50 in Ferndale this week. But the county average is down around 30. So we are in that range between 25 and 75 when we can start cautiously planning. But if you follow these numbers like I do, they fluctuate a lot. And so we're trying to see a pattern emerge before we flip the switch too quickly. We're also want to make sure that we get good enough at this distance learning so that if things go in the opposite direction, we know what we're doing. But that's why, like I said earlier, we are right now starting to plan for how we can phase in because of those numbers, because our community is doing a good job of controlling the spread of the virus. I think we're going to be back, in doing some in-person if we can keep going in that direction.
That sounds great. Thank you so much. I want to thank the community members who have joined us live today. As always, what we plan to do is post this live video on our Facebook page. What we also do is upload the recorded webinar onto our YouTube channel, which then gives us the ability to add closed captioning. So that video, which has the access to closed captioning, will be posted later. So I will make sure that gets posted before our next week's Q&A. And as a reminder, we'll be back here next week for another Q&A. So send those live questions in advance. We can take them via Facebook. So if you shoot us a question via Facebook or via our email, it can be fscinfo@ferndalesd.org. If you shoot questions that way, we get them as well. So send them our way in advance, or we'll try to answer questions that we missed live. Thank you so much, everyone. Have a great week.